Part the Mistveil Sealed has been the single best sealed experience I have had in the entire time I've been playing Flesh and Blood. So what changed that made this sealed format better? So first of all, they changed the rules a bit for sealed, where for this particular format, not that this is going to be for all formats, it's 8 packs instead of 6, and on top of that, we have a hard 30 card deck size limit. So no less, no more. So there's no more 40 card fat deck fatigue games. It's 30 cards no matter what. These two things combined meant the average deck was a much higher quality compared to previous sealed formats. With the quantity of cards that you have, it usually means that you have enough cards for each hero to make meaningful choices on which hero you play. In previous formats, most of the time, the only choice you could make was play whichever hero that could operate on the least number of quality cards as possible and lean into a fatigue strategy because their weapon and or how many 3 blocks they could play, such as Teklo fatigue, fat deck, and Arachne fat deck fatigue. And since decks were such low power, there was no meaningful counterplay to this since you couldn't output enough damage to go over their blocking value. Because of this, it leads to a ton of hero diversity in this format where you can reasonably play any hero in the format. You don't feel like you sit down and you're like, I guess it's another pre-release, I guess I have to play new again. No, you get to actually look at your pool and figure out which hero is best for your pool. And you could even, I think, force sometimes, even if your pool doesn't necessarily support it, if you just no matter what, I want to play this hero. It also removes one of my least favorite things about sealed, which is when you get a sealed pool that is just bad and you feel like you lost before round 1 even starts. This happened to me in so many events, and it is super frustrating because you have no control over this. You spent all this time and money going to this event just to open a pool, and you're like, man, I got no reds for the only good hero in the format. I guess I just wasted $50+ on this Battle Hardened. Speaking of card color, this format does a lot of things interesting with that. First is the obvious, which is this format revolves around blues. I really like the design of the blues in this set. Most of them play at a normal blue rate, but they can jump through some hoops and allow them to play at the rate of a red, which I think is really interesting and gives a lot of depth to the format of trying to find interesting ways to get value out of your cards. I would really like to see more design like this though, specifically in yellows in the future, because generally there's just no reason to ever put a yellow in your deck unless it only comes in yellow or some super niche reason, like, for example, blocking in this format with yellows against Noose, and she can't banish the yellows and it means you're not blocking with your good reds. That's a niche that yellows can fill in this format, but typically there's not a lot of good reasons to play yellows like that. I wrote a whole article about this on the Mothership, the Fab TCG website about deck building and figuring out the resource base of your deck. If you're interested in reading that, it'll be in the description below. But one of the parts of that article was about yellows, and I didn't really have much to say on it. I basically said what I said a minute ago in this video, where it's only if the card comes in yellow or you have some niche reason that makes sense at that moment. And then when I submitted my article, the person that proofread my article was like, hey, can you add some more about reasons to put yellows in your deck? And I literally spent an entire day thinking about it, and all I could come up with was what I had already said. So I threw it back at him and I was like, do you have a reason to play yellows that I didn't mention? Because honest to God, I cannot think of anything. It's basically, you want to play the rainbow of that card or niche reasons. It only comes in yellow or niche reasons. It's yellows are just usually super suboptimal and fab, and there's just generally no reason to play them. So I would love to see some more design like this where you can try to find interesting ways to get value out of the cards that you're not normally trying to either add to your deck or not normally trying to cast. With the increased card pool that you have with the extra packs, and the deck size restrictions that you have, it means that you're not going to have to fill your deck with doo-doo cards like, filler blues just because you need to have enough pitch cards in your deck, or blues because you literally didn't open enough reds to have a playable deck for having aggressive cards. This is a huge win in my opinion. On the same note, because you get to cherry pick the cards in your pool that go into your deck, you end up having some really interesting deck building decisions. I mentioned this a moment ago, where you're not like scouring for just like rando blues that are trash to put into your deck to have enough blues. Because of this, I saw a really interesting choice come up. How many chi do I put in my deck? There's a lot of risk reward involved with that, where it's like, on the one hand, if I put too many chi in my deck, I might get caught my pants down, my hand just doesn't block, or like I just draw a bad hand that's just like, all I have is chi and this doesn't like do anything by itself. On the other, maybe I don't have enough chi in my deck where I can't get value out of my hero power, or I am lacking in that extra bit of value where I can not get fatigued. I think that leads to a lot of interesting decision making where the answer isn't obvious, and I really like that. I like where there's like not a obvious correct decision and you're allowed to kind of come up with your own answer for that. To me though, what was far more interesting was the depth of sideboarding. Oh my god, you have no idea the amount of happy brain chemicals it made for me when I realized I could have a really detailed sideboard plan in Sealed. Like, okay, I have these good blues that I'm going to play into Enigma and Zen, but I really can't afford to have these banished by New, so I can't play these blues into New. So then I need to figure out some other blues that come in versus New, but also like, if I'm sideboarding versus New, maybe I want to bring in my D-Reacts because they're pretty good in this matchup. But if I'm against Enigma, maybe I don't want these D-Reacts because if I have to clear board, I probably don't want to be blocking that much. I need to make sure that my hand guarantees getting through their block value and I can get that aura off the table. I love this so much. It just adds so much depth to the format, and I just love finding tiny edges like that where you can like have these little moments of skill expression. It feels very rewarding, and I like there being more to deck building than just every single sealed event I went to for Bright Lights was literally I'd open my packs, put them on the table, flip my pile upside down, thumb through my pile and grab every single 3 block, put them in a pile, find my evos, make sure I'm playing like good evos in my deck, and I'm done deck building. I'm done in like 30 seconds. This just adds so much to it, and I just absolutely adore this, and I hope we get more of this in the future. My only complaint about the format is how some of the Majestics can feel kind of swingy in the games. The power level of a lot of Majestics in previous sets were far more subdued, where either they were like niche CC cards that just aren't relevant for draft, or there's some sort of payoff for something that's just like far too hard to realistically do in a limited environment. Of course, sometimes you get some Majestics that are just like very good, but most of the time it's just like, it's like a point above rate. It's not that big of a deal. In this format, it feels like a lot more of the Majestics are just generically significantly better than their common and rare counterparts, and are just, you just got to kind of free roll playing them a lot of the times, where they're not like these niche cards that you have to jump through all these hoops to get value out of them. A lot of times you slam it on the table, you get a ton of extra value, you win the turn cycle super hard, and it can lead to snowballing the game. For example, one that I came up was Chase the Tail. That card's kind of dumb in limited. Just 2 Crouching Tigers and you get a card that's worth 7 for 1 resource. But then the extra dumb part can come up where, what if you recycle that back into your deck and you do it again and you just get to tutor it because it has combo with your hero power? You can just use the ninja helmet to put it back in your deck and just do it all over again. And it can just lead to snowballing games. It's like a smidge too powerful in my opinion, some of these Majestics. I don't think it's the end of the world, and it's not as bad as Heavy Hitters when it came to that. I had a big problem in Heavy Hitters Sealed specifically Sealed, not draft, where it felt like if you drew a bad hand, you could just fall super far behind and your opponent could just start ignorantly wagering into you and you just couldn't get out of that hole and the game would snowball off of that. And that's just all things that are happening with commons and rares in the format. It's just things that your opponent's naturally going to have in their deck in every matchup for the most part. And that was more of an issue of you drawing bad, where this is an issue with just select cards are just like a little too pushed for limited. So I'm not like super hard complaining about this. I don't think it's the biggest of deals, but I see that happen and I'm like, this is like a little annoying in the format, but if that's the worst, I'll take it. Honestly though, my biggest hope from all of this is LSS takes all the positive feedback from everyone, because I think most people have really enjoyed the sealed format. I haven't really heard that many complaints about it. I really hope they take this feedback and apply that to their booster pack structure. A lot of people for a long time have been saying, add more cards to packs so that way the draft format has a few more cards. Why are we 14 cards? We used to have 15, for example. The smaller pack size, and just the nature of how Fab Draft is compared to other games like Magic, it really lends itself to committing really hard to something. And not necessarily forcing, just like when you end up deciding what you are, you have to commit to it a lot of the times. And it's very hard to pivot off of that if you end up in the incorrect seat. And if you do pivot, it very frequently leads to train wrecking the draft for multiple people, including yourself. A few extra cards is something that a lot of people pointed at that might help with that problem, where you can potentially draft a little bit more open and have more freedom to pivot. Because one of the problems with pivoting also is when you end up like deciding your hero, pick 4, 5, 6, and you end up figuring out pick 7, 8, you're in the wrong seat. It's really hard to throw away half a pack, especially when it's like half a pack of premium picks. The amount of value you're sacking by throwing away that many pack one pick winnable cards is usually not worth it, and you should just put your head down and continue forcing your hero. I realize that you could argue this is like a layer of strategy within it, and it's an adjustment thing, and you know, we've heard it before, get good, get better at it, but like, it is the reality of it, and it's not enjoyable. I don't think the majority of people like that aspect of draft and Fab. I haven't talked to anyone personally that's like that. I've had many conversations with other top players in the game, and I've heard a very similar sentiment from a lot of them, that it's a negative experience for them when this happens, and it's not something that you can like really strategize around. There's some things that you can do strategy-wise in your earlier picks in the draft to try to put yourself in a position where that doesn't happen to you. But when that does happen, there's not a lot you can do. You just gotta hope for the best at that point. I'm curious though, did you guys enjoy the sealed format as much as I did? What was your experience with your pre-releases? What heroes did you guys play? Were there any cool interactions that you guys found that you thought were really good in the pre-release format? As always, if you want to see more content like this, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and I appreciate you. Peace, YouTube.